Hey, movie fans! We have a very special guest. He's wanted to be on the show for quite a long time. Who are you and why are you here?
Well, thank you, Nate, for having me. My name is Michael. We are discussing the top five most misleading trailers of all time. Now, what do we mean by misleading?
Basically, what the advertising team and what the people that cut the trailers together presented to us as what the films would be like is not what we really got in the final result. Now, this doesn't mean that they're bad. A couple of these movies on this list we both actually thoroughly enjoy.
Sure.
More because it was a surprise of, oh, that's really not what we were expecting at all. But not all of them on this list get that luxury. We have several duds, including our number 5, which is what, Michael?
Tomorrowland. Brad Bird, what were you doing?
Not making Iron Giant 2, that's what.
Amen to that.
So, what exactly was the problem with Tomorrowland's marketing and then with the execution of the final film?
I believe what Bird was trying to do was create a timepiece for our generation and for just a little bit younger, but he tried to cram too much into the film. Thus, the ending revealing a apocalypse style ending to Earth, and therefore we need new dreamers to take it over. I didn't buy it.
It did get a bit preachy towards the middle and the end. I think for me, the film was advertised as the next great action adventure by director Brad Bird. He's done some great movies with Iron Giant, like you mentioned, Incredibles. Was it Ghost Protocol, which up until a certain point was my favorite Mission Impossible until Mission Impossible 5 came out.
Thank you.
So we're like, this is just going to be another great live action film by Brad Bird. And it really wasn't. It wasn't even an action movie. It was very preachy, and it was more about the message than the action in itself. Now, the actors themselves weren't bad. Britt Robertson she was pretty serviceable in her role as the main female lead. And then George Clooney was there.
George Clooney?
Yeah, Hugh Laurie was there. Everyone was just kind of there. There wasn't too much action. It suffered from Superman Returns syndrome.
I enjoyed the child actress. I can't remember who played the android in that.
Yeah, she was good, but
that's about it.
The film promised a lot of action, and we really didn't get that at all. We got a lot in the front end, and then some in the back end, but it really just dropped out in the middle, and once you found out what they were fighting for, it was just
It felt, once they got to the utopia of Tomorrowland, it felt like it was almost The Giver-esque in a way.
Yeah, which some people like The Giver, but The Giver was executed better, and they basically knew how to advertise. At number 4, we have another one that didn't have as much action as we were led to believe in the marketing, and that is Godzilla 2014. Now, we also could have put the really bad 1998 Godzilla on this list, because that basically advertised that we would like the Godzilla that we saw. But this Godzilla promised us kind of that we would see Godzilla, kind of.
Kind of.
But the thing I think that really clinched it for us as why this would be on the list is that the film promised us, or the trailers made us believe, that Heisenberg, Bryan Cranston, would, be in the movie for more than 10 minutes.
Which, granted he was, but 15 is barely giving anyone generous amount of screen time. I don't know, I felt like the movie was very good. I enjoyed it. Of course, seeing
it was fine. But I would have liked to see a little bit more Cranston, more so than his son.
My dad was a huge fan of Godzilla. I remember getting and pre-ordering our IMAX tickets, and I wanted to take him to it because he's a huge fan. I kind of wanted to have some father-son time.
Yeah.
Well, I remember reading some reviews that made me nervous. Was that the consistent theme amongst the reviews were seeing Godzilla pays off in the end, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, and all the reviews consistently said there's not enough Godzilla, but the end, it does eventually pay off, which in my opinion, I agree. However, I didn't really want that to have to pay off. I wanted to actually see him, especially when they kind of tease it and it just cuts away. I was really
that got annoying, and I think they'll work on that for the next one. But yeah, it didn't deliver. Now, we're not saying it was a bad movie. No. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of the best theater experiences I've ever had, because I saw it in IMAX, and his roar shook the theater. It was fantastic. But as a whole, given what we were given in the trailers and all the marketing, we were just kind of, that was fun. I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
But, however, not all the movies on this list we actually have an issue with. Some of these, we were pleasantly surprised by what the trailers were. Like, they presented something and we got something else. As was the case with our number 3 pick. The Adjustment Bureau.
Yes.
Now, Michael, how was it marketed, and then what was it actually?
Well, I remember specifically that this seemed to be more of a suspense action thriller, kind of superficial.
How it was marketed.
Yeah.
Was action.
Very much so. The marketing strategy was not memorable to me whatsoever.
No.
But then when you got into the film, you kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that I had missed the first time through, and I had to see it a second time.
It's so good. They advertised it as like the next Bourne, the next suspense thriller from Matt Damon, who's just like the king of action movies. But it really wasn't, and it's one of the few times that a movie will not deliver on its promises, but I'm okay with it because the film is definitely more of a thought-provoking piece, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It got me to sit back and go, I never really thought about it that way. It's a very out-of-the-box idea, and I really liked seeing that play out on screen. I was expecting to be holding my breath the whole time in anticipation and in action, but I was more just, I never thought about it. And I liked that, being able to think, and that movie really made me think.
Especially with, it's not something you have to turn your brain off. It engages you, and it actually asks you to do that, and it doesn't feel like it's forced at all.
We also were very pleasantly surprised with our number 2, which, Michael, what was our number 2, and how was it marketed, and how was it delivered?
Cabin in the Woods, coming out, I believe, in 2011. Very much a marketed piece as a teen slasher horror film.
Generic.
We've
Totally generic.
We've seen all this stuff almost as if Jason X, but put in...
Hey,
what's
that's a masterpiece right there.
Oh, yeah.
Jason X.
What trailer did you watch? But
you don't want to see Friday the 13th in space?
Which, by the way, we need to preface this. There are going to be spoilers in the next 2. But when in the first, half of the movie, they kill off one of the biggest action stars of the past couple of years, Chris Hemsworth, you kind of get this idea of maybe this isn't the mundane horror movie we were coming to expect.
This is just like a teen slasher at that point. You got the creepy dude telling him to turn back, but then you keep cutting back to this, like, computer desk and these nerdy analysts with the dad from Step Brothers, and you're like, why did they keep cutting back to that? Why is that relevant? And then you get about halfway through it, and you're like, this is not any horror movie I've ever seen before. I don't even call it a horror movie.
No,
this is a comedy, straight up. And it's a love letter to horror. And once again, we put up the spoiler tags. Michael, what happens in the second half that they really couldn't say in the trailers because no one would see the movie?
It's almost as if it was owed what you said to a lot of horror movies, but when I saw the very end scene where pretty much everyone dies, it's very much a comedic way. I never thought I could say, everyone dying, but in a comedic tone. But you see a lot of homages to older style of. There's the Grudge style of creature. There's a huge python that comes in and eats people.
That's
a
great.
Texas Chainsaw guy running around, and it's ridiculous.
Angry unicorn that gores somebody.
I forgot about that.
The movie in and of itself is more of a comedy. They marketed it as this generic slasher movie, and it really wasn't. It was written by Joss Whedon, who did Avengers. This came out of the writer's strike that happened a couple of years back. He had nothing on the table, so he's just like, hey, I'm going to get a couple of my buddies together, and we're going to make a movie. And it turned out to be a really fun time. It ended up being fantastic. It was a fun, very unique and different movie that was like, okay, I didn't see that coming from the trailer, because the trailer made it seem as generic as possible. And now that I think about it, that probably served to the film's advantage big time. So what's our number 1? The one that we're like, we feel lied to, actually.
I gotta take off my glasses to emphasize this. We have had a unanimous decision on this for years, I would think. Movie
it's
came
one of the
out.
few movies that, like, the twist comes and it raises my blood pressure a little bit. The film came out in 2013, and we still haven't gotten over it.
No, it's something that you described, I think, perfect. You said, once this twist comes, people are going to love it or hate it. There is no in-between.
I hate it. I cannot stand it. We are not going to keep you in the dark any longer. Iron Man 3. You know exactly what we're talking about. We're looking at you, Kingsley. Mandarin. So, we were talking about this before we started filming.
Yeah.
And we figured out why it bothers us so much For those of you who don't know, the plot twist is the whole film is like the Mandarin, this big bad villain of the Iron Man world. He's an actor, played by the great actor Ben Kingsley. He's not doing a bad job in that role. Our problem, though, is, one, the Mandarin is essentially the Joker to Iron Man. He's essentially the Joker character in terms of level of villainess. He's the big bad of the Iron Man world, and they turned him into a joke. However, his supplementary villain with Aldrich Killian was barely mentioned at all in the trailers, at all in the merchandising, and he really wasn't that compelling of a villain.
No,
I think
not at all.
Had Aldrich Killian been a good villain, I could have coped a little bit better with the Mandarin plot twist. I would have been like, okay, yes, you weren't the real one, but we got a better villain in return. What other issues do we have with the marketing and the trailer, the initial trailer for Iron Man 3?
Me and you, we are huge suckers for trailers. But with Iron Man 3, it's such a dark tone of just destruction, chaos, doom.
It sounded like they would break away from the typical Marvel formula of comedic. And it wasn't.
And it doesn't. And there's a shot of Iron Man, he lays down and his face is bloody, his mask off, he's laying in the snow. It kind of just, you're like, what in the world how does Iron Man get from where we've seen him in Iron Man 2 to here? And then specifically the last shot, I remember, and I love details, but this kind of just really threw me off. The last shot is, there's no music, you just hear the wind, and you see him walking and dragging his Iron Man suit behind him. And it's just fades to black, and then the date of the movie comes out in front of you, and then it just shuts off and just ends in this despair. But then the movie doesn't even take itself seriously, in my opinion.
And we got our hopes up because it was a different director. It wasn't Jon Favreau anymore who directed the first two. It was Shane Black, and I was like, okay, maybe it's a different tone. Granted, we should have probably seen it coming with movies like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is more comedic, but we're like, I think they're going with darker, because typically third installments of a trilogy are either darker or lighter than some of its predecessors. And this one, we're like, are they finally going to do something unique? Are they finally going to break away from this more comedic aspect? Yeah, you can have some comedic elements, but make it an actual challenge for Tony. Make it darker. And the film was an Iron Man movie. It was par. Yeah. It was barely above Iron Man 2. We don't mind the movie. It's not bad. It's enjoyable. I'd probably give it about a 7.5 or maybe even an 8 if I'm feeling really, really nice that day. It's not a bad movie, but the whole Mandarin and a lot of other elements felt like it was a plot twist for the sake of having a plot twist. And we're just, we felt kind of lied to with the movie that we got in the trailers, and all the marketing was not the movie that we got. Well, what do you guys think? What are some of the most deceptive trailers you've ever seen? And then when you see the movie, it was completely different. Let us know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel, or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at 17 Movie Reviews. Stay sharp, movie guys and gals!